Gentlemen, welcome. Today we are talking with Dr. Tina Schermer Sellers. She is a board certified clinician and she's going to dive into all of the different things that she does, but primarily what she focuses on is family, sexual health, and the ability for us dads and our wives to have a better intimate relationship, and especially how we can educate our children and how to function in this world that is super hypersexualized. There's a lot of different things that we're going to talk about today. I'm excited. I'm a little nervous to hear what's going to come out of this thing and the things that I need to change up. But Dr. Sellers, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. And thanks so much for having me, Ryan. I'm so glad to be here with you and with your
Yeah.
audience.
Yeah, you have books, you have speaking circuit that you're on. There are so many things that you do, and you're really kind of changing the ethos, the atmosphere that's as it pertains to everything that you work on. So we definitely will dive into your background and things like that. But let's jump into it. I got pressing questions that I know dads, especially new dads that have pregnant wives or just had a baby, they want to know these things, right? So Dr. Sellers, tell us the stats. What happens once your wife has a baby when it comes to intimacy in the bedroom? What can dads expect? I did a video about this a few months back to kind of lay the groundwork that it's not what you might expect. Have an open mind about things, but from your perspective, what's going on over there?
It's a huge change. You've gone from just being each other with each other to now you have two very big roles in your life. So, in addition to being maybe a son and a worker, coworker, or business owner, and all the other things you are in your life, and a partner, now you're also a parent. And you're a parent to a little human who's captured your heart, put it outside your body onto your arm, so it now doesn't feel protected anymore, and who needs 24-hour convalescent care and speaks a language you don't understand because they cry. It's like your learning curve is straight up. So the stress on you as a couple and in this brand new relationship as parents is really high. And on top of that, your partner, and I'm going to assume, just talk as if, your partner is a female partner who has just delivered a baby out of her body. Her hormones are going wild. If she's nursing, she's trying to figure out what that is and what that means. And her body, which used to be her body, now has been part of baby's body. And now this baby is going to feed off of her body. And that's all new for her, too. And she's got this really new feeling like I've got to do it all right. I've got to know how to do this and I've got to do it all right. Meanwhile, my hormones are crazy and I'm no longer sleeping more than maybe an hour at a time. So you're exhausted, and that exhaustion grows over that first 6 months. I mean, it's just a lot. And then as the child begins to get some kind of rhythm into place, and again, that rhythm changes the minute you think you've got a rhythm, but you do get a little more rhythm and a little more used to things after the first 6 months or so. There's just all kinds of new changes. So you're trying to figure out, how do we keep this relationship thing going? So, in lots of straight couples, the way they've organized their sexual relationship prior to this has been very informed by our culture and by 2,000 or more years of it really is all about ejaculation and her being happy enough. Like me feeling like I brought her pleasure. Like I need to know that that happened. I'm speaking for the man here.
Right.
And so they may have never really talked about, is our sexual relationship meeting our needs? What is good sex? I mean, is good sex just when ejaculation happens and she seems happy enough? Is that good sex? Have you ever really talked about it? I would venture from the work that I've done over, almost 40 years, that good sex is anytime both of you feel like you had some connection with each other, you felt connected, more connected to each other, and you shared some pleasure together. You both would say, yeah, that was pleasurable for me. Might not be exactly the same, but you both go like, yeah, that was fun. That was pleasurable. And I feel more connected to you. That's good sex. Now, does good sex happen every time intercourse happens? I would say no. But a lot of times people aren't talking about it. Well, one of the times you're going to start feeling like maybe we need to talk about it is after this baby's born. Because she's like, I'm not even sure what parts of my body belong to me anymore. I'm not even sure I have the energy for pleasure. Pleasure to me is like, can I sleep a little longer, right? So now all of a sudden, the things that were in place before really feel interrupted, right? But you don't know how to talk about it because you've never really learned how to talk about it very well. But now you're not having connection and pleasure or sharing connection and pleasure in as easy of a way as you were before, right? That is just what's going to happen. If you know that ahead of time, you can start these conversations earlier. Like, what are all the ways we've ever experienced connection and pleasure with each other that kind of just belong to us? And I'll often say to couples, get some like butcher paper, put it behind a door. Like if you've got a door in your bedroom, put it there and just start writing down what are the 5-minute connection and pleasures we've done in our lives, 10-minute, 15-minute, hour, 2 hours that really we just did together. Now, intercourse is going to be on there along with some lots of other things, but there might be things like sitting in the bathtub together, taking a shower together and talking about something we haven't usually talked about, laying in bed together and just holding each other, being body to body and not doing anything but holding each other and falling asleep because I only do that with you, or just whatever. But you're going to now feel this like you're thinking about a banquet. I don't eat the same thing for dinner every day. I don't even eat the same thing for breakfast every day. And I like for people to think about connection and pleasure in that way as well. Like, what are all the ways? Because if you do that prior to baby being born, now you don't feel so butthurt when you're not doing things exactly the same way. And you've got ways to talk about it. Like, what do you feel like you've got the energy for? I miss you. I miss connection with you and sharing pleasure with you. But I don't want to impose an idea that you don't have the energy for. So tell me what sounds like it would feel connecting to you and pleasurable, you know? And she might come up with something that really doesn't require a lot from her, right? Energy wise, but where she really feels like she's seen, heard, known, and accepted by you. What men have to do is go, oh, I really like it when I feel like she's present to me and really giving her heart to me. And I actually like that better than when we have sex and she feels like she's somewhere else. I really don't like that as much, but I don't know what else to do. So we just put up with that. So you just start having these conversations where you actually build on what I call good sex, connection, and pleasure, but you let it be diverse and you let her body come back to her, where she's like, oh yeah, what was that feeling I really liked, you know? And meanwhile, men, I say to men, and I often will say to couples, you guys need to know and let it be okay how each other pleasures yourself, right? Talk about that so that she's got the freedom to find that again for herself. And he's got the freedom to move through his arousal cycle whenever he needs to, when he has drive to move through his arousal cycle, understanding that drive and getting through his arousal cycle is not the same thing as intimacy with her. But intimacy with her might need to be diverse in its
Right.
expression.
Yeah, that's a challenge, right? Especially
Yeah,
when you're talking about the guy's arousal cycle. I mean, having that conversation can be a huge challenge.
it can.
Where
And
does,
again, it's a challenge because we don't grow up talking about it.
yeah, absolutely. Where does porn come into that for guys? I mean, I've heard you talk quite a bit about this, where,
Mhm.
it can cause quite the challenge and the strife between couples. And I've
Yeah.
heard that it really causes more problems for men in particular because they don't have as good of an intimate relationship when they are engaged in pornography.
Well, I would challenge that a little bit because just like there are different reasons why people drink, there are different reasons why people use pornography. It could be to escape really a difficult relationship, and in part, I can go into my fantasy world and I can have a pretend kind of experience over here. But bottom line, it doesn't get at what your heart is missing. It passes time well. You'll move through your arousal cycle. That's a big dopamine hit. It's got some benefits, but it's not going to take care of what your heart is wanting. It's not going to take care of your loneliness, not in a real way, right? Being seen, known, loved, and accepted and feeling that way from the person you're building a life with is both challenging to do over time, but it's what we're aching for. So it's worth developing the skills to know how to do it. So one of the things that happens is that women are often raised to not understand male sexual development, and men are raised to not understand female sexual development. Men have often been looking at pornography, especially if you're under 50, you've been looking at it online, usually since the average age that kids are exposed to it is age 9. Right? So they've been looking at it for a long time. Once the body's up and running, you can move through your arousal cycle pretty quickly if you're looking at porn, right? You can move through your arousal cycle with your imagination, in the shower, all kinds of ways. And both women and men have been doing this a long time. But pornography makes it really easy, especially for people that are drawn to visual imagery, right? It makes it really easy. But I always like to separate masturbation from pornography. I don't think that any secrets that have to do with a violation of the trust that you have in your relationship is ever going to be good for a relationship. So people need to start talking about, how often do I feel like I have a drive to move through my arousal cycle? I get a big hit of dopamine, prolactin, things that calm me. It's actually super helpful to me. Can be very much the same thing for her as well, but that is satisfying a different need for each one of them. Then I need you. I need your eyes. I need your heart. I need you present. And I care about how we do this together. But women often feel threatened by pornography. They don't understand it. Not always, but often, especially if there's been any like religious overlay from their community or wherever they are. They can feel like that's a betrayal to them. But we have to understand, and now I think men have to understand, that women, since their earliest memories, have been getting the message that they are not okay. Their bodies are not okay. We drive our economy by making people feel worse about themselves. We have 50% of 6-year-olds, 2/3 of 9-year-olds, 90% of 15-year-old girls that have been and are modifying their diet because they've already gotten the message from all our different media places that they aren't good enough, right? But then they're also going to get the message that what makes them valuable is how sexy they are. Makes them valuable to who? To boys who have been raised to use women for their own pleasure, but not treat them in ways that are necessarily respectful. So if they've been looking at heterosexual porn, if they are straight and are looking at heterosexual porn, it's largely exploitive of women. It's very misogynistic, right? Well, if you take those habits and thinking into your relationship, she's not going to feel seen, known, loved, and accepted by you. And if you don't learn how to talk to her about how can I approach you and be with you in a way that you feel the love I feel for you and the connection I want to have with you, if you don't learn to have those conversations, she doesn't learn to be honest about what she really wants and doesn't want, then they keep missing each other in the bedroom and in the kitchen and everywhere else, right? Because he doesn't know how to communicate in her language. He doesn't understand her. She doesn't understand him. And they don't understand the difference between drive to move through my arousal cycle so I can calm down, right? And my desire for intimacy, to be seen, known, loved, and accepted by you. They're different, and we have to learn how to have these conversations, which is part of why I talk about this so much, but it's so much, it's delightful to help people learn how to do this when they're older. It is incredibly exciting to teach parents how to raise kids to have these skills as they grow up and start forming friendships and later relationships and whatnot, and understand themselves and understand what happens. Let me just give you a little example. Boys between the ages of 13 and 15, typically, if they are going through their developmental process, they're going to have 20 times the amount of testosterone begin pumping in their body than they had before. I often say boys go from being bicycles to rocket ships, and there is nobody telling them that's what's happening. So you're feeling keyed up. You're feeling like you've got this inside of you. You don't really understand it. You're having wet dreams. You're masturbating. All you're getting from the boys club is, yeah, did you tap that? Did you hit that? What did, like all this stuff. It is not honoring the heart and soul of this human at all, right? And Peggy Ornstein wrote a book called Boys and Sex. 5 years later, she wrote a book called Girls and Sex. She's a New York Times bestselling author and journalist. She interviewed 80 girls for the Girls and Sex book, about 100 boys for the Boys and Sex book, and both of them look at the impact of current media on kids today. And they are critically important to read because what you hear the boys saying is, yeah, this is what's happening in my friendship group. None of it feels okay here, and I have no one to talk to about it because it's wanting me to be a person I don't want to be. But if I own that in front of my peer group, I'm ostracized. I'm called a pussy, right? And I've had conversations with grown men with their kids. I mean, not with their kids there, but who are raising kids who are like, Tina, I have to tell you, I remember standing outside a bedroom door in my frat house and knowing what was happening in that room was not okay. And I am trying to come to terms with that now as a dad of a 12-year-old girl. Heart, crying. And I'm like, we could have done better by you. And I'm so, so sorry that we threw you to the wolves of our media world that we live in. And now you're wrestling with this stuff. But I'm so glad you're brave enough to talk about it now. So it's a complex issue that often will begin to really rear its head when baby's born.
It really is profound. And I think that's the biggest challenge that you, dad, watching this right now, as your wife gets into this whole situation of baby coming into the world. Well, I don't remember what the movie was where he's yelling at his girlfriend, F you hormones, right? It's true. The hormones are crazy. They're raging. And there are so many challenges. So I think that's the biggest thing to take away from that component of the conversation is just try to have those conversations. And it can be really, really hard. I struggle with that personally. So
Yeah.
having those conversations, that's what I'm taking out of this, is just try to be open and talk with it about your wife and move forward.
Right. And each of you try to help each other understand yourselves and that you're different and that the impact of patriarchy was different on each of you and that there's a lot of healing to do in order to find a way to be in relationship to yourself and in relationship to your partner in a way that feels loving to both of you. It takes work. And I'm really obviously a big one that'd be like, if this feels too hard, if you guys are going round and round in a circle, you're having the same argument over, find a therapist that'll help you untangle the web because it's a big web. And we did this to you. You are not bad because you were masturbating in secret when you were, you know, 12 and 13 and 14, whatever. You were not bad. Neither one of you are bad. You are good and your desires are good. We just didn't give you the equipment you needed to do it in a way that could allow you to not feel filled with so much shame about it. We, as a culture, filled you with shame. It's not you. You're not bad. You're delightful and wonderful. And there's only ever been one of you ever and ever will be. And there are some things to learn here so that you can do it better. And then so you can do it better with your kiddos as they're growing up.
Let's dive deeper into that kid conversation. I want to hear from you on thoughts on boys in particular first, and then I definitely want to talk about girls, which is a whole nother component. So
Yeah.
when you talk about boys, as I mentioned to you, I have a 9-year-old boy and a 6-year-old boy, and then a daughter who's almost 4. And we're kind of just starting to get into that point where, we've tried to shelter our 9-year-old as much as we can, but he's still around other boys in 3rd grade and he's seeing a lot of these things. So from your perspective, generally, Tina, what are some of the challenges that boys in 2025, around that 9 to 14, 15-year-old range, what kind of challenges are they facing that maybe we as dads, when we were that age, didn't face?
Yeah. we have to understand that we have a culture that's driven by corporate values, right? Values of how do we make money for our stockholders. And so that means that things aren't happening in a way that are protective to families and protective to kids. And so it really puts the onus on parents to do all of the kind of equipping of the child to deal with a world that is very much driven by corporate values. So, power might be one of them, one of the things to talk about. So when my son was 9 and my daughter was 5, because there are almost 5 years apart. I guess she would have been, almost four to 5. I overheard one day as they shared a room at that moment, heard my son, and I sent them in to clean their room, and heard my son say, "I've got a lollipop, and I will give you a lollipop if you'll clean my side of the room too." And she's like, "Okay," because she thinks he walks on water, right? So I pull him aside and I said, "Okay, dude, so I just heard this. Can I ask you a question? If the roles were reversed, if you were almost 5 and she was 9 and she had said that to you, would that have felt fair to you?" And he said, "No, probably not really." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to teach you something today because you're going to hear me say this at other times. That is what we call an abuse of power. You're 9, she's almost 5. You've been on this world, 5 years longer than she has. You know so many things she doesn't yet know. She's not as big as you. She's not as heavy as you. And she adores you. So you are taking advantage of all of those assets, if you will, and you're using them to get something from her. We call that an abuse of power. When anybody does that to someone else, it's not a loving thing to do. It's not a just thing to do. And in our family, we practice love and justice. So I want you to remember that, and I'm going to work to help you see how you're using your power, because you're going to go out into the world and there's going to be people that are older and bigger, and they might try to abuse their power with you, and you need to be able to say, "Do I feel exploited here?" But the other is going to be true too, where you're a very cute, boy who's very charming and lovely. It is going to be easy for you to exploit your power too. And I want you to understand power and how it's used for good and how it's used for ill in our culture and in our home. So that's part of my role with you in your life, growing up boy. So that's one of the things that we did in our family, because I knew he was going to grow up a very good looking white male who is going to have lots of things, who's athletic, going to have lots of things handed to him because he's fitting in a mold that our culture values, right? So I wanted him to have that sensitivity. There are other things like that, like understanding emotions. I remember he came home in first grade and he said he cried and a teacher came down on him about it. And I said, "Honey, one of the things I love most about the way that you were created is that you have a tender heart. And you are a really good listener. But I want you to know, in our world, we tend to dismiss that in boys. But I want you to remember that that is one of the best qualities in you. And the more you can know what you feel and how to articulate that and have emotions that are consistent with that, the more you're going to be able to do relationships, friendships, and later a relationship with someone who is special to you really well. So when you get people discouraging you, I want you to go inside yourself and say, "They're wrong. My emotions are right, and they're good." So there were ways in which I was clear about how patriarchy was going to try to diminish the power and beauty of my son that I wanted him to hold on to, because they're skills he needed for what make us happiest in our life. There's been an 85-year study at Harvard called the Happiness Study, and it continues to look at what makes us happy, and it's the quality of our relationships, our ability to give and receive love. I wanted those skills to be strong in him And I was aware of where in culture we tended to diminish them. We focused on your accomplishments, your athletic accomplishments, your school accomplishments, your career accomplishments, and not your relational accomplishments. So when he was in fifth grade and I went to an outdoor ed week with them, and they put me in with the girls, which was the first time that had ever happened. And I'm like, wait a minute, I thought I got to be with my son. No, no, I was going to be with the girls in a girls' cabin. And all the girls are talking about, all of them have something to say about my son. He listens better than most girls we know. He's the nicest boy of all the boys in fifth grade. I went back and talked to him about what I was hearing. I said, this is your reputation among the girls. And what it tells me is that you're using your power well because they feel safe with you. You're also acknowledging their emotions. They feel seen by you, which means you're probably also acknowledging your own. And I'm really proud of that because that's what I want to see grow in you and get better in you. I care about how you do in school. I'm going to care about your job, but I am never going to care about those things more than I care about your heart, ever. And the skills you have to be a friend and to recognize good friends. And so that's where the focus for me was with the boys. And with my son, who was, I always say your first one takes you to places you've never been before, right? That's your practice, right? And so that was really there with my daughter. It was different then. I mean, we would talk about power and we would talk about management of all of that and stuff, but it was much more her learning to understand how she deserved to be treated. And was she being treated in that way? And was somebody trying to take advantage or exploit her or treat her in some way that didn't feel honoring to who she was? Because I would often say that person doesn't deserve you as a friend if they're not able to treat you in a way that's honoring. That's how we treat people, because people are remarkable. They're a wonderful gift. You need to feel that. So you're not important because you're there for other people. You're not important because you put other people first. That's not what makes you important. You're important because you were born important. You were born valuable. Your job is to make sure that you are requiring people to treat you that way. And you're not settling for people treating you poorly. Because that's a piece that often girls will do. They'll make it all about everybody else and they'll lose what's valuable about themselves. I'll be important when he likes me. I'll be important when, no, baby girl, you have always been important. You have a special role here on earth. I don't know what that is, but I want you to go looking for it because it's there. And so it's more, where do we diminish women in culture and then helping build that up in our girls? And where do we diminish men and how we build that up in them? And they're really different, because with women, we are over focusing on relationship responsibility. She gets assaulted in college. What's the percentage? 80% of girls are assaulted in college. It's ridiculous. And she immediately is asked, well, what were you wearing? Were you drinking? Right? We have been doing this since the 4th century, blaming women for men's behavior in Christianity, which is the religion that is most influential in the United States, right? So we have to have different kinds of conversations.
Your point about abuse of power is profound, and I can see how that worked so perfectly for your son, obviously. And it will be something, one of the many nuggets that I've taken from our conversation thus far, of talking to both of my sons, but especially my older son. He exhibits those type of things, even with his little brother, right?
Yeah, sure. Of course
So
he does.
being able,
It's human.
yeah, exactly. So, and he treats his sister like she's a little princess, almost too much so. To that point, that's something that's truly great. And your son was, and still is, I'm sure, a poet, right? Has that ability to have the emotive interaction with his peers. At the same time, there needs to be a bit of a warrior
Oh,
in
absolutely.
in that boy, in that young man as well. I heard a story from just a gentleman, Jesse Carstairs, who I interviewed just last week, and he said, one of the boys in a middle school came up and physically assaulted a girl, pushed her up against the locker room and held her up against the locker room, and nobody did a thing. Everybody
Right.
was staring there watching it. And
Exactly.
I want my son, and I would assume that you want your son to see something like that happen and have no fear about his parents being mad that he stepped in and knocked that kid to the floor, right? So
Absolutely.
those are the two kind of dichotomies. You want a warrior and a poet. How can you kind of help? And I think that's just a good segue for this conversation. How can we help to get both when we're raising our kiddos at such a, unique age where they're listening to us still?
Yeah. I would say it's not a dichotomy. And I'll tell you why. When you teach a child to understand their power and how to use it for good, that warrior is there too, because they know how to use their power for good. I can remember my son came home from, he was a junior, I think, in high school, and they had gone to a dance. Group of them had gone to a dance. And a guy came up to one of the women and verbally assaulted her in front of everybody. And my son came home, he goes, Mom, it was the coolest thing. And I go, wait, explain this to me. He said, I got like a puffer fish. And he's 6'2". He goes, I got so big and I got in this person's face. I looked like I was enraged. And he goes, and yet inside, I knew it was a performance to scare the out of him. And I did. And the minute he just like flattened and left, I was the same person I was before. He said, because I knew that that situation required that of me. So I could see along the way as he was doing his sports, that he had it didn't arrive in him until probably fourth grade, that he had a competitive spirit in him. Third grade basketball, he was still handing the ball to people, like the other team. Like, here, no, you take it. Fourth grade, it started to finally emerge, this sort of competitive part of him. So I knew that was going to be there, but I wanted him to know how to use it and when to use it. So when he told me that story, it was so heartening to me because I knew that he knew what he was doing. And later, when he was 25, he's 38 now, we had a conversation about how did we do power? How did we teach power? How did we do that as a family? I actually interviewed both my kids at 20 and 25 on this, and the interview's in a book. And he said, because you taught me how to pay attention to power, I learned how to use it in business in really appropriate ways. And he goes, I feel like I've been mindful of it my whole life. So I would say it really is the same. We're not making a kid a less fiery or whatever when we teach them about their power. We're teaching them to know it, respect it, and choose how to use it for good in the world. And sometimes that's big. It's big power, right? We need to not be afraid of that big power. He's now the dad of a 7-year-old and 4-year-old girl. The fact that he knows how to manage his frustration and anger with them, because he's been practicing managing his power and understanding that he's, more or less God to these girls, right? It's wonderful. So I would say you can do both, or you are doing both, when you just teach them about their power. And then what does it mean to use it? You have lots of conversations. Well, tell me how you used your power in that situation. How did you use it for good? Are there places you wish you did it a little better? That's part of learning. We learn through experience. It's not a mistake if you turn it into a lesson. So what's the good thing to pick from this? So it's an ongoing conversation, and I would say it works to serve both.
This is music to my ears as a dad of boys. There are so many things that we fathers have a responsibility to foster. And I think that these two that we've just talked about are really at the top of the list in many respects. Of course, not discounting anything and all the things that the mother brings to
Oh,
the
absolutely, of
parental
course.
relationship, of course.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. You've talked about it. Let's dive again a bit deeper on the girl side of the house.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different animal. I'm lucky in that I have a girl who's younger, so she's kind of got that protection of her brother. She's got all of that, and gosh, Allegra and I mean, we just did a daddy-daughter dance 2 to 3 weeks ago. She still glows about it every time we talk about it. It was one of the most memorable experiences for me as a father. Period. Full stop. And I know
Mhm.
for her it was a core memory, which is really
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah.
But there are so many things as a dad to a little girl that I am trying and fearful of as we continue. And the social media aspect of it, a lot of the things you've already articulated are really profound
Yeah.
as we move into these years as she's going from preschool to kindergarten to third, fourth, fifth grade. So
Mhm.
can you just kind of talk to me again, some of the challenges that girls are facing, similar to boys, right, in society,
Yeah.
and how those are manifesting?
Sure. Again, in the book Shameless Parenting, Everything You Need to Raise Shame-Free Confident Kids and Heal Your Shame Too, in that book, I give recommendations for books to read to kids and with kids, and books for parents. Birth to two, two to four, four to six, six to eight. This is an ongoing conversation. So when you're really wanting to do it well, you're going to be giving them what I call sound bite conversations every year, every month along the way. So last week and 2 weekends ago, my granddaughters were here and they wanted to watch So You Think You Can Dance because they like to watch that and then put performances on, right? And so we were watching it, but on streaming services now, commercials have come back, and if you want to get rid of them, you pay more, right? And so we were sitting and watching, and commercials were coming on, and I was like, wow, I haven't seen commercials in a really long time. And then I thought, I'm going to use this as a learning opportunity because with girls, I want them to have, and this is true for boys too, but I think I feel that fear you're talking about a little bit more with the girls. I want them to have media literacy. I want them to understand that when we are doing lots of things in our media, it's to sell them something, and we're doing that in a particular way. But they don't know that there's cameras in the background, that the commercials are for some people but not for others, that they lift up some people or some looks or some whatever and not others. And I want to develop that kind of media literacy. So I started. I said, "Oh, you guys, so you know what a commercial is?" And they're like, "No." And I said, "It's a way in which they pay for this show because the people who own the thing that they're trying to sell you is paying, helping to pay for the show." So I said, we're going to play a game. Whenever a commercial comes on, we're going to see if we can figure out what they're trying to sell us and if there's a message there that they're wanting us to hear. And then we're going to remember that there are cameras everywhere and they put this together and somebody wrote the script and whatever. So we
Acted it
decided to
out.
play a game.
Yeah.
And we just did that. And so, like, one of them was medicine. And, like, I don't know what that was. And I'm like, I know, that one's really confusing, isn't it? Was that a medicine? Yeah, I think it was. Well, isn't that interesting? So, who gives medicine to people? Well, your doctor does. So, why do you think they're trying to sell us medicine? I don't know. That doesn't really make sense. You know how hard that makes a doctor's job when a patient comes in and they don't know what's wrong with them and they tell the doctor what medicine to put them on and they don't understand? I said, I have so many doctor friends, their job has gotten so much harder since we've been selling to people. So anyway, we just had many conversations. We turned it into the, lesson number one on media literacy because the girls, you know, they don't have a TV at their house. And so they're very, you can be very picky about what kids view, and so they haven't really had a lot of it. But that was one of them. I thought, okay, we're going to do something with this. So I think media literacy, and I talk about media literacy in the book, but helping girls become aware that the world is trying to give them a message. And much of that message is you're not good enough unless you look like this, sound like this, dress like this, all of it. And none of that is ever true. None of it is ever true. And there's so many places to talk about this in the family. I can say to my little ones, like, look how different you are from your sister. You guys are different. You have different gifts. You have different looks. You have different capacities. One of you can do cartwheels and the other one can't do cartwheels. Like, you're different. You're supposed to be different. You were made different. It's a gift to the world. So commercials, when they tell you that you should be like just like this, That's ridiculous, right? But I'm also listening for what they're bringing. So, like when we were watching the show, there was a dancer who was in a larger body. So I was thought I'm going to listen to see if the girls say anything about her body being different. They didn't say anything. So I thought this is not the time to talk about that that's been sold, because that's probably not yet been sold to them, that your body has to look a particular way, because neither one of them thought they liked different things. I mean, so I
Yeah.
don't make assumptions either. I'm listening really carefully to what messages they might be getting. And since commercials are subliminal in the messaging often, I wanted to make it overt and not covert while it was happening, right? So it's part of that. And I talk about it in detail in different areas of the book, because kids developmentally become curious about different things at different ages, partially based on who they're running around with, but also partially based on cognitive development, body development. And so the problem with the talk has always been that it never works, and that you need to be having 100 1-minute conversations, some at 2, 4, 6, all the way along. Um, and when kids come home at 6 and say, how are babies made? And we dive into an hour-long conversation that they listen to the first 45 seconds of, it's not helpful. It's just not helpful, But it's usually our anxiety because no one really did it very well for us, which is another blessing, I think, of this book, is that you can reparent yourself in this through the same book, through the same
Yeah.
thing. Hmm.
And I'll of course link the book below. I think of an analogy, and this is again really interesting. You're basically being the play-by-play announcer or color analyst for your daughter in this case, for what's happening around the world, giving
Yeah.
them the context for that and speaking to them in those little minute chunks will make that difference.
Yes. And it really does. It equips them. And if we think about it, we are busy equipping our kids in so many areas, right? So many areas of life, like how you do manners and how you do relationships. So we're equipping them. How do you do your homework? How do you plan? How do you, whatever. There's just so many things. But in the area of relational development, emotional development, and sexual development, we do very little equipping. And yet, those 3 areas are your foundation to happiness. It's where you're going to do your attachments from. Yeah. And so it's really important that we figure out, well, what are my relational and sexual and emotional tasks I want to try to hit, or that they're going to be curious about at this age and this age and this. So I'm going to be listening. I'm going to be watching. I'm going to be asking, in that developmental space. I'm almost 65. And I remember when I was younger that we had conversations a lot in culture, in my family, in my neighborhood, blah, blah, about child development. And we have very little, I think, conversations so that parents actually know, like, no, they're not going to be 30 when they're 3 and 6 or 8. This thing they're doing is not about you. They're not trying to be terrible to you. They're trying to understand what independence is. They're trying to understand what their own personal power is. They're trying to understand what choice is. And the way they do it is always going to be bumpy. You did it bumpy, and they're going to do it bumpy. So your job is to understand where they are developmentally, hold the boundaries, and say, yeah, that's not going to work. Find another way. You can find another way, be creative, find another way, but this is the boundary. And the boundary's there because my job is to protect you and help you be challenged, but not so challenged that you're going to get hurt. I mean, emotionally or otherwise, right? It's what we do every step of the way.
There's a guy that I've followed quite a bit. His name's Nick Freitas. He talks a lot about his daughters and growing up and parenting. And he was one of his big things that he talks about is when you're trying to raise your daughter to look for a good man and to be, powerful in herself, what did he do in order to try to facilitate that? And when he was in the military, he went and talked to one of the guys that he was in the force with and said, because this guy was an absolute womanizer. He had done, slept with all kinds of women while he was deployed. And he asked that guy point blank, what do I have to do to make sure that my daughter does not fall in love with a man like you? And he said point blank, tell your daughter you love her. Tell her all the time. Say it
Mhm.
as many times as possible. That way, when she gets to a point where somebody does say that they love her, or whatever this guy says in order to get her to do what he wants, she'll realize that that's not the case. That's not the true love that's coming forward. It seems like this is basically what you're saying. As dads, we need to show both in our relationship with our spouse and with
Mhm.
our daughter in particular, this
Mhm.
is what true love, compassion, appreciation looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say open the conversation up even a little bit more, like, I love you. And then follow up all the time with, I loved you before you were born. My whole heart loved you before you were born. And then you were born, and then I loved this. And then I saw how stubborn you are. And while it drives me crazy, I am so glad you're strong. I love that about you. And what have you learned about love from me? What have you learned so that you can recognize love from other people? Because I love you and I work really hard for you to feel that and know that based on my behavior and my words. Have there been times that I've treated you in some way that didn't feel like love? Let's talk about that too, because I've made mistakes. Let's talk
Right.
about that too. And so you help them really tease apart their recognition of love. And then I love that you say how you're loving your partner. We know from the work of John Medina, who is a cognitive scholar at the University of Washington, he studied what do we know about kids who are able to learn well at school versus kids that are struggling to learn. And he said, what we keep coming back to is those kids who are in homes that are calm and where there is visible love between the parents or between the adults in the house. It's like those kids don't have a white noise machine on when they're at school. They're not worrying about anybody because they're good. They're fine. And we've had such a focus on kids and a focus on careers in the last 40 years or so that I used to have grad students, because I was a professor for 28 years. I had grad students that would say, I can't remember ever seeing my parents hug or kiss. They came to every game. They came to all my teacher parent conferences. I don't remember seeing that, their affection. So I used to run couples retreats, and I would say to people, the best protective thing you can give your kids is that they see your marriage every day. Not you as parents, but your marriage. They see you hugging in the kitchen. They see you saying, yeah, we're going out, and I know you want us to stay home, but we're not gonna because we gotta go play. They come to your door in your room, and the door is locked. And they're like, let us in. You've got a response. We're in here playing and we like to play alone, right? You are demonstrating what love looks like between two adults in an age appropriate way, because that's where their sense of security comes from. That's where their lack of worry can come from. And that's where their own belief that they can have that comes from. We don't make that enough of a priority. We don't talk about it enough. And a lot of people are like, yeah, and marriage is hard. And I'm like, yeah, it is. It's the iron that sharpens the iron. Your partner is pointing up to you the thing you need to work on, and you would rather blame them. And this is marriage. Marriage is a constant invitation to what I say, grow up, show up, and shape up. And it's hard, but it's good if we answer the call, right? If we keep looking at our own stuff.
John Rosemond is an author. He's kind of like the OG of parenting books. He's got a book called Parenting by the Book. I'm not sure if you've heard of it before. It's all basically parenting on biblical principles. And he articulates everything that you just did, Tina, in terms of when you are playing with your spouse and when you are coming down, cooking breakfast in the morning, or your wife comes home at the evening, give them a hug, give them a kiss, ask them how their day was, and really be married to them, focus on your spouse first and foremost, and then the kids will basically raise themselves as long as you have that. So it's so profound. So thank you. You
Yeah.
mentioned briefly the talk, the birds and the bees talk. Can you give me, a minute, 2 minutes or so? how can we as dads, and of course our spouse, have or begin to have that talk? When it should it happen? That kind of stuff.
Okay, first, we're not going to do the talk. We're going to
Little chunks.
understand that, yeah, that every age there are things they're curious about. There is behavioral tasks they're trying to accomplish, emotional tasks they're trying to accomplish, and there's body curiosities that they're going to have. And it starts as early as 11 months, a year, pre-verbal, when they find their genitals for the first time. So rather than, ugh, ah, slap the hand away or whatever, you're like, yep, that's your penis. It's a great part of you. Finish diapering, right? Or that's your vulva. It's a great part of you. Finish bathing them. Just label the world because that's what you're doing everywhere else. Eyes, ears, nose, whatever, cat, dog, we're doing with labeling. Those are the things they're going to be curious about. That's what they're going to need from you. That's what you're going to do at 2. Right. And there's different things. At 5, they start to figure out themselves and their own bodies. They're going to eventually learn, like when you're saying, not at the dinner table. I know that's a wonderful part of your body, but we're going to try to do that in our room or the bedroom. So I want you to try to wait. You're going to have to say that 150 times between 2 and 4, whatever. Then they're going to start to get that. But then they're going to be curious about somebody else. And you're going to walk in and 2 kiddos that are playing together at 5, they're going to have their pants down. Normal curiosity. There's nothing wrong here. This is not sexual. This is, I have a body, you have a body. What does yours look like? And you're like, well, of course you're curious. Good for you for being curious. Let's keep our clothes on. Let's go out and play. You just give them what they're needing right there. A lot of parents, because they didn't get this, what they got was shame, a lot of shame. And a lot of times you ask somebody like, were you ever shamed? They'll go back to about age 5 or 6, because that was the first one they remember. That was not the first one. That's the first one they remember, right?
Right.
And this is why shame is so deep in people, because it's been going on for so long. And then the culture lays its shame upon you. So really that book, the Shameless Parenting book, will hold your hand and it'll say, here's what you're going to likely see during these 2 years. Watch for it. Give them just this. But then I also ask things like, how do you imagine it's going to be for you? When your kid finds their genitals, when your kid walks in on you, when you walk in on your kid with their pants down. And if you can feel a part of you that goes, I want you to put your hand on your heart and say, all that tells me is that the people who loved me just didn't quite know how to give me what I needed. That's all. You are good. Your kiddo is good. Here's what you need to give them. Here's the books to go get at the library. They're super fun. The books are going to give you all the language. They'll be age appropriate. They won't be too much. It'll also help you stay kind of in line, so you're not going into the 8-year-old stuff when you're with a 6-year-old or whatever.
Yeah.
So I would just say follow along and be just 2 years ahead of your kid. That's it. And I'll help you with the rest. Yeah.
It's a really good point. I appreciate that. You've talked about a couple of times that there are some key pillars of improving family functioning in a lot of your different discussions, your books. Anything you want to say specifically about that?
Well, I think one of the things that we hit on that is important is take care of your relationship first and foremost. Make your relationship with your primary partner more important in how you're taking care of yourself and them and the 2 of you. So kind of having, I'm going to take care of myself. I remember when my kids started having kids, I said to them, I would like to help you institute that once every 3 months, one of you goes away for a weekend. The next month, the other one does, or with a friend, whatever you need. The 3rd month, you go away together. And I will be here to watch kiddos, and then the next month you can start that over again, or you can decide something different. Go do something with friends, whatever it is that feels right as a family. But I said, if you do this, if you take care of yourselves first and then take care of your relationship, then your kids are going to have the stability and you're going to have the inner resources for the patience that you're going to need to do this well. You're not going to do it perfectly. There's not a such thing as being a human and being perfect. We're radically valuable and we're radically imperfect. However, you'll have more inner resources and more collective resources if you're caring for those things like this. And so I'm often like, let's put skin on that. How will you do that? Right. And I remember the first time that my daughter-in-law went away, and I think the oldest one was probably 6 to 8 months, somewhere in there. It was really hard. And it was, maybe it was even closer to 9, but I'm trying to remember because it was her birthday. And I said to my son, I want to pay for her to go away. And he goes, this is going to be really hard to talk her into. And I said, I know. But I know what an introvert she is, and I know that she needs some time to listen to her own thoughts, to read a book, to walk on the beach, whatever it is that she needs. And she's going to come back restored. And once she experiences that, she's going to then know why it's so important to do. And this is a modeling that I want her to have, not just for herself and for you, but for her girls. I want the girls to see that mom was doing these things for herself, that she knew how to take care of herself. And so we started that really, really early. And it just took the one time for my daughter-in-law to be like, oh, yeah, I need that. And we're like, yeah, we got you. We got you. So how to help people find the resources inside their community, whether it's their church community or their actual community or their neighborhood, where they can get some of that. Because if you are caring for those aspects of your life and your family life, again, your kids, their own sense of ease and safety will increase. And then the other thing I will say is that we know from research that parents who get comfortable talking about body stuff too, and relationship stuff too, and cultural stuff too, right? Those parents that do that, kids not only get involved with sex later, make safer sexual choices, choose partners, friends, and people to date that are more in line with their own values, right? Lower STI rates, lower teen pregnancy rates, and this is my favorite thing, they describe themselves as closer to their parents overall through their teen years. So for parents that really want to remain a resource, so kids aren't just going to their friends, get good at talking about what's going on sexually or emotionally or body-wise, the stuff that we're silencing as a culture. Get good at being just curious about that with them. Be like, what's happening at school? Is this going on at school? Like, and then just be there around that kind of stuff. Listen to them, see them, because they're going to realize they can talk to you about anything, and you're going to be straight with them. And kids really need that from their parents these days, because culture's rough out there. And a lot of parents have no idea the war zone their kids are in every day once adolescence starts, once junior high starts. And it is a war zone.
Yeah, truly. As we kind of land the plane here, where Dr. Tina Schermer Sellers, can people find you, learn more about what you do?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at Dr. Tina Shameless. You can find me there. You can DM me. If you have questions about either book that I wrote, feel free to write. I'm happy to chat with you. I also have people that put together book groups, and then they'll say, hey, can you come to our last group and we can chat? I'm like, if I can get it in my schedule, I'm absolutely 100% there to support parents and people in their development and to get more joy out of their life. You can find my books on Amazon, but if you're one of those people that's boycotting Amazon right now, all you need to do is take the book to a local bookseller and say, hey, can you order this for me? And they'll do that for you. You can get them wherever. If any of your listeners can't afford either book, but really want one of the books, they can DM me and I will send them a promo code for an audio version of the book. Happy to do that for people. I don't want people to not get them because they can't afford them. And that's probably, the biggest ways to follow me. Yeah.
And I'll link all that down below. Thank you. 2 questions. These are some of the most important ones. The first one, Tina, from your perspective, what is your advice to dads who want to kind of level up in their relationship with their wife, with their kids in 2025? You've touched on a whole bunch of things, but what else do you think?
Seek to understand her experience in her life, her feeling experience, her goals, her dreams, her wants, what's working and what's not working. And if you can hear it like a reporter rather than take it personally, and just be curious, bring curiosity to it. So what would it look like if I could be more supportive to you in that area? Where have I been? Where could I do better? You bring real curiosity to her. She will often show up with so much more visibility, right? Because what it's doing is it's giving her more of a sense of safety. And a lot of times that's what women aren't feeling out in the world. They're not feeling safe there. And so the more they feel seen, known, loved, and accepted, the more they feel safe in their relationship, the more they feel like their partner's learning them, not just asking them to adapt to them, the more they open up and they bloom, literally. And you're the one who made that happen. Like, you're the powerhouse here. You made that happen, but you did it in this way that came out of pure curiosity and love. And she'll see that. And that's where I'd say I'd go.
And it goes back to your point that you just made in terms of getting out of the house. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
stuck in this circular
Yeah.
challenge of day-to-day survival and you never take time to go to a hotel, even just down one city over, to
Right.
just try to have those conversations with a glass of wine. Yeah, thank
Absolutely.
you. That's great. I ask
Absolutely.
this last question of everybody that comes on my podcast. I call it the Diamond Advice. So you have two kiddos, a young man now and a young woman, and they
Yep.
obviously are fantastic kids. It's so fun to
There.
hear their story.
Mhm.
But hypothetically, Tina, they have gotten out of the house and they have forgotten everything. All these lessons you and I have talked about, they've forgotten them all, except for one piece of diamond advice that they can take with them. What is your diamond advice to your kiddos?
I'm a really integrated thinker or an integrative thinker, so it's hard for me to do the one. But I think the more they can see that they themselves are radically valuable and radically imperfect, and that they are on a mission to keep learning and being the miracle that they are in the world. Like, a lot of the other stuff is going to fall in place. Like, as they make a mistake, they'll be more curious about the mistake and how to make it better, how to rectify it, how to bring restoration to that relationship or whatever. They'll have more humility and an ability to forgive themselves and forgive others, right? So I think it's really realizing. I think, shame has you thinking that you're not valuable or worthy of love and belonging. I think when we see ourselves as innately valuable and yet not perfect, I'm on a learning mission, I'm a pilgrim my whole life, that's okay. But I want to stay on that. I do think of myself as valuable, and I am committed to the mission of becoming the best me that I can. I think that helps everything else fall more into place in time.
Tina, it was an honor talking to you today. You're a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Ryan. It was so fun to be with you.